Good morning. My name is Vicki Henschelwood. I invite you to turn to Acts chapter 9, verses 19 through 22. If you're using one of the church Bibles, it's on page 778. Again, that's Acts chapter 9, verses 19 through 22. And if you would, if you're able, please stand with us as we read the scripture. Chapter 9, verse 19. And after taking some food, he regained his strength. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once, he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, "Isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on this name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests?" Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated.
Good morning. My name is Will. I'm the youth minister here, and I really am glad to be here to join with all of us in what we do every Sunday, which is remember God, and celebrate redemption, and offer ourselves back to Him. So really am glad to be here this morning. I like when I get to teach on a morning where, this happens frequently, but where I feel like by the time I, or really any teacher, comes up, it's like, wow, it's already been just so good. I loved the songs that we sang a lot, and I loved what the Cranes shared about 12 years of following Jesus. It reminded me of Philippians 3, like whatever things I once counted gain, now I count as loss, in view of the surpassing value of knowing Jesus Christ, my Lord. And so, like somebody who's really followed Jesus can look back and go, a nice house, it's nice, but it's nothing compared to knowing Jesus. It's just really been a good morning, and so I really am grateful to be here. Did you ever play that game? It's not really a game. Maybe it's a game. Where's Waldo? You know what that is? You have those books, and it's like full of stuff on the page, and you have Waldo. Okay, Waldo. I don't have a picture of it, but Waldo has the red and white striped shirt with the little funny hat, and you just look for Waldo. Where's Waldo? And you know he's somewhere on the page. And then when you finally find him, what do you think to yourself? There's Waldo. Okay, usually once I find Waldo, then I kind of think, like, he just stands out so much. And I'm like, how did I not see Waldo? He's just, like, waving to me this whole time. And that's Waldo. Apparently, you guys never looked at these books, or I don't know. Maybe you don't love them like I do. Acts 9 has a little bit of Where's Waldo in it, but we'll see why I say that. I think you guys already opened to Acts 9. If not, you can go ahead and turn there. We are in the book of Acts, and just briefly, here's where we've been. Acts so far, we've seen in chapter 1, the Holy Spirit was promised, and the mission was given. You shall be my witnesses. Where? In Jerusalem, in Judea and Samaria, and to the remotest parts of the earth. In chapter 2, the Spirit that was promised in chapter 1 is given, and the mission begins, where Peter stands up. He proclaims the gospel in the power of the Holy Spirit, and a lot of people come to know Jesus. And then in chapters 3 through 8, the church grows. It's like explosive growth, even through a number of different trials, both from without and from within. And then last week, we saw one of the most unlikely guys get converted, coming to know Jesus. We saw last week that he, on the road to Damascus, had a collision with the resurrected Jesus, and he became aware of his own darkness, of his own need and that God used a servant named Ananias, and Paul, known as Saul at the time, his eternity was changed in that conversion. And as important as the conversion was, there's more to Saul's story than just conversion. And that's what we get to see this morning. So Acts chapter 9. I'm going to read the first verses again, and then I have some questions. All right? Chapter 9, this second part of verse 19. It says, "Now for several days Saul was with the disciples who were at Damascus, and immediately he began to proclaim Jesus in the synagogues, saying, 'He's the Son of God.' All those hearing him continued to be amazed and were saying, 'Is this not he who in Jerusalem destroyed those who called on this name and who had come here for the purpose of bringing them bound before the chief priests?' But Saul kept increasing in strength and confounding," or I liked the NIV, baffling the Jews who lived at Damascus by proving that this Jesus is the Christ. Okay, so we got Saul. What is Saul doing? Yeah, he's sharing the gospel. He's proclaiming Jesus. So that's what he's doing. He's proclaiming Jesus. And as he's proclaiming Jesus, what is he saying? Like, what is his message about Jesus? He's the Son of God, and then the last part of verse 22. He's the Christ. Jesus, he's going to the synagogues. Jesus is the Son of God, and Jesus is the Christ. That's what he's saying. What was he doing, though, before the preaching? Verse 19. Yeah, it says, "Now for several days he was with the disciples who were at Damascus." Now, we don't get any details there, but I do think it's just kind of worth noting that right after his conversion experience, the first thing he does is he gets plugged in with some other believers who are like-minded in thinking, like in identity and mission, and just want to throw it out again to us that a big part of life after conversion is getting involved in a community where you can be strengthened. And I think I've shared this before. You know, I'm in a life group, and I love my life group. And there was this season where my wife and I, we started going to life group, and for various reasons, we only went to every other week because of some logistics stuff. And we kind of came to a point where we were like, all right, we didn't feel like we're getting a lot out of it. And we're like, okay, we got to either buy in or just kind of get out. But just kind of like halfway participation wasn't really good for us. I don't think it was good for the group either. And so it really has made a big difference for us to say, all right, we want to be in this group. I don't want to just go. We want to buy into what's happening. We want to get plugged into a community, and that's going to require something of me. So just throwing that out, Paul's post-conversion, one of the first steps is getting plugged in with some people. If you haven't done that, there are a lot of opportunities to do that here at Sandhurst with life groups or D groups or Bob groups, or, find a group, and there are opportunities to do that. Anyway, so he spent some time getting plugged in. He's proclaiming Jesus, and there are two words that describe the crowds or the people who are hearing him, two words that describe their reaction to Saul. The first one is in verse 20. "And immediately he began to proclaim Jesus in the synagogues, saying he's the Son of God. All those hearing him continued to be," what word do you have? "Amazed," or astounded. Christian Standard Bible people, way to go. And then verse 22, "But Saul kept increasing in strength," and what word do you have? Verse 22? Confounding or baffling. Okay, so we got two words. As Saul is preaching Jesus, they are amazed. Wow. And they are baffled, just kind of like confused because things aren't meeting up with their expectations. So that's their response. We're going to actually, even though this one comes first, we're going to look at it second. I want to look at this baffled part. What are they baffled specifically about? I know I'm asking a lot of questions. Yeah, that's actually what they're amazed about, but they're baffled about something else. Let's just read it. It's only 3 verses, so we can read it a bunch of times. Okay. But Saul kept increasing in strength and baffled the Jews who lived at Damascus. What were they baffled about? By Paul proving that this Jesus is the Christ. So what are they baffled about? They're baffled that they're hearing this guy Saul making these convincing assertions that Jesus is the Messiah that they've been looking for. Now, this is a big deal to them. And we know that Saul's strategy for making these convincing assertions wasn't his kind of charisma or just kind of, he was really persuasive. His strategy for convincing people that Jesus was the Messiah was the Scriptures. We see later in Acts 18 says that Paul was proving from the Scriptures Jesus is the Messiah. Wait a second. In my Bible, I don't read about Jesus till the book of Matthew. So what is all this talk about proving from the Scriptures, like from the Old Testament, that Jesus is the Messiah, like the one who would come and deal with the problem of sin? What's that about? Well, man, I'm pretty excited about this. Turn, if you can, to Luke 22. I don't know why I say if you can. You can. Turn to Luke 22. Not 22. What chapter is it? 24. Luke 24. There's this really cool thing that happens after Jesus' death and then resurrection, where he comes and he starts walking with 2 guys on the road to Emmaus. These guys are really bummed about Jesus' death. They think it's all over. They're really bummed. Jesus starts talking to them. They eat a meal together. And then look at this. Luke 24, verse 27. This is really good. Then, beginning with Moses and with all the prophets. Now, when he's talking about Moses, he's talking about the writings of Moses, which would be Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, like the first 5 books of the Bible. So this is a way of capturing the whole Old Testament. Moses and the prophets. Okay, so here we go. Verse 27, then beginning with Moses and with all the prophets, what did Jesus do? Well, he explained to them the things concerning himself in all the Scriptures. So it's like Paul wasn't the only one going through the Old Testament and saying, Jesus is there, Jesus is there, Jesus is there. Jesus, after his resurrection, is doing that too, taking some guys and going, hey, open up your Old Testament and let me show you where I am. So I was really excited about this. I wanted to try to go through a journey of the whole Old Testament this morning, and then I came in on Monday and I was trying to practice. I just couldn't do it. Unless we wanted to be here till like 3 o'clock. It wasn't going to happen. But I love what Jesus does. And I love the response. So when Saul, as he's called right now, when Saul shows Jesus throughout the Old Testament, their minds are baffled, right? Well, what happens for these 2 guys after Jesus points out himself in the Old Testament? Verse 32. Jesus, reveals that, hey, they're talking to Jesus. And then Jesus vanishes, kind of a bummer. Verse 32, they said to one another, were not our hearts burning within us while he was speaking to us on the road, while he was explaining the Scriptures to us? I love that. I love that. In 2 different places, the Scriptures are explained in a way that shows, in the Old Testament, Jesus is there, and he's there, and he's there, and he's there. And in one place, their minds are baffled. In the second place, I guess technically it would be the first place, their hearts are burning. Minds baffled, hearts burning at seeing, whoa, the Old Testament, Jesus doesn't just show up in Matthew. So, I thought it would be I think it would be a cool gift of grace if God could this morning help us to just see some places in the Old Testament where Jesus shows up, and that this morning we would join the guys on the road to Emmaus, people in Acts 9, that this morning our minds would be baffled and our hearts would burn in us as we see Jesus in the Old Testament. So I want to do that by answering, they're baffled by what was said. I want to do that by answering this question. What is it about seeing Jesus in the Old Testament that causes minds to baffle and hearts to burn? That's the question that we're answering. What is it about seeing Jesus in the Old Testament that causes minds to baffle, hearts to burn? Here we go. Few thoughts. Seeing Jesus in the Old Testament baffles minds and burns hearts because, number one, it gives us a fuller picture of the gospel. Like what we see in the Old Testament in Jesus gives us a fuller picture of the gospel. Let me give you one example. This is a pretty well-known example, okay? Passover. We just celebrated Christ in the Passover a few weeks ago, and a lot of you came. It was really awesome. If you aren't familiar with Passover, here's what happens. The people of Israel, God's chosen people, they're slaves in Egypt. And God uses some plagues to ultimately make his name great in Egypt. And the 10th and final plague is where God and the destroyer are going to come on Egypt. There are people sleeping. Wake up, wake up, wake up, okay? That's one advantage like being a youth minister, or like throw something at them. Okay, wake up, glad you're here. What are we talking about? Passover. Okay, so Passover, God and the destroyer is going to come down and is going to kill every firstborn in every household. How many of you would die? Okay, all right, a lot of you. Not me. Ha, my older brother would die. It's going to come down. Except, is there any way out of this? Yeah, there's a way out. Find a lamb. What kind of lamb? An unblemished, perfect, spotless lamb. Examine it for 5 days. Make sure it is perfect, spotless, unblemished lamb. Then take that perfect, spotless, unblemished lamb, slaughter it, spill its blood. Paint the blood of that unblemished lamb on the doorpost and on the lintel so that as the wrath of God comes to your house, the wrath of God would pass over. Graciously. Pass over. And we see this in the Old Testament, and it just gives us a fuller picture of what God does. Not just that he passes over our sin, that he doesn't just save us from our sin, but that Passover was actually a first step out of slavery then and into what? Into freedom. It wasn't just that God saved them from one thing, he set them free to something else. Something that they failed to walk in because of fear and unbelief. Like me so often. Passover gives me just this fuller picture of the gospel. And this is what Christ in the Old Testament does. Another thing that when we see Jesus in the Old Testament helps me be, it highlights God's bigness, or I say helps me be baffled by the bigness of God, who was not scrambling trying to find an answer to the problem of sin. Oh no, what am I going to do? But rather carrying out really a beautiful and a patient, intricate, grace-based plan and promise of redemption. I want to share something with you. This just, it baffled me. Okay, that's what I want to share with you. It baffled me. I don't think I really understood this until college. There's a promise that's made in the book of Genesis to a guy named Abraham. It's 4 parts to the promise. Promises him a people, like a lot of people. I'm going to make you into a great people. I'm going to give you a land. That's the second part. People, land. And then I'm going to make you into a great nation. That's the third part. And then I'm going to bless you. And in Genesis 12, it says, actually, Abraham, through you, all the families of the earth are going to be blessed. So God makes this 4-part promise. People, land, nation, blessing. Then Genesis 15 says that Abraham believed God. 15:6 says, then he believed in the Lord, and God reckoned it to him as righteousness. Okay, that threw me for a loop. I remember sitting in my dorm in college going, wait a second. If Abraham could be declared righteous just based on a belief in any old promise of God, like a people, land, nation, blessing, then why do we need Jesus? Like he believes a promise. God says, okay, I'm going to declare you righteous based on your belief. Why do I need Jesus? I don't see Jesus there. So do we need Jesus or not? Then how was Abraham justified, declared righteous based on belief in a people, land, nation, and blessing? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Galatians 3. Galatians 3. You don't have to turn there. Galatians 3. This is really good. It repeats in Galatians 3 what Genesis 15 said. It says, Galatians 3, verse 6 says, even so, Abraham believed God, and his belief, was credited to him as righteousness. Therefore, be sure it is those who are of faith who are sons of Abraham. The scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham. Wait. So when God made that promise of people, land, nation, blessing, he was preaching the gospel? I don't understand. Where's the gospel, the good news about Jesus in that? Well, preach the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, all the nations will be blessed in you. So Galatians 3, Paul's like, hey, I want you to know, when God specifically mentioned the blessing part of the promise, he was preaching the gospel. What? How is that? Wow, I'm not. Verse 12, or verse 13, which is skipping down a few verses, says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law, having become a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree, in order that in Christ Jesus, the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles, so that we would receive the promise of the Spirit through faith. So the answer to the blessing is not a what was the blessing, it was a who's the blessing. And when Abraham promised to bless Abraham and all the families that are through Abraham, who was God promising? Jesus. And so when Abraham believed the blessing, he was believing in Jesus, through whom all the families of the earth would be blessed. Mind baffled. I just remember going, oh, I understand now. Nobody was saved in the Old Testament by offering sacrifices. Saved through putting their hope and their faith and their belief and who those sacrifices pointed to. Abraham wasn't saved because he believed in the old promise. He was saved because he believed in Jesus. So it gets better. Okay, so in Genesis 15, Abraham is really unconvinced, because it's been a while, about God's ability to keep this promise, because this whole promise depends on a kid, at least one. And Abraham's really old. He doesn't have any kids. And so he's like, God, how am I going to know? How am I going to know that you're going to keep your promise? And God says something to Abraham that to him would have been really familiar language. To us, it's like, what in the world? Genesis 15, verse 12 says, verse 8. He said, O Lord God, how may I know that I will possess it? Talking about the land that God has just promised. So he said to him, this is God's instructions to Abraham. This is good. Bring me a 3-year-old heifer, okay, a 3-year-old female goat, okay, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So 5 animals, 3 years old, so fully grown. We're not just getting like some small thing. What are we going to do with them? Then he brought all these to him, and this is what Abraham did. Cut them in 2. And laid each half opposite the other. All right, so, most of us probably have made some sort of commitment to, read straight through the Bible in a year. And maybe we got to, Genesis 15, probably, if you made that commitment, 15 chapters in, and maybe just read that and was like, I don't know what's going on. What is the deal with these animals? Well, actually, when in Genesis 15 it says that God was going to make a covenant with Abraham, the actual word there is you don't make a covenant, you cut a covenant. And so this is the background. We know this from extra biblical documents that one of the ways you would make a covenant is you wouldn't make a covenant, you would cut the covenant. And so here's what you would do. You would take these animals, like were just listed, and oftentimes they would dig a trench and wear their nicest clothes, okay? And then they would take these animals and take whatever, sorry if this is a little morbid, it's a little morbid. Take whatever tool you have and start whacking. Cut it in half. Lay each side of the animal, so you have this aisle. It's okay, so you can imagine this trench. You can imagine what's in it, right? Kind of gross. And then, once you've done that, you would make your covenant to the person. You make your promise. This is what I'm going to do. And you would make it, and then you would walk through all this stuff. You can imagine just getting in your toes or whatever. Just you walk through it. You make your covenant. And here's what you're doing. Here's what you're saying. You're saying, as I make this covenant, I'm saying that if I ever break my promise, I'm asking to be made like one of these. The stakes just got raised. I was just thinking, gross, but this is the way weddings should be. You know, a new aisle, a new sort of red carpet, and when you walk down the aisle, and the guy says, "I do," this is what it should be like. I'm committing, and if I ever break my promise, make me like one of these. So you would make your covenant, and you would pass through. Sometimes you would pass through together, or sometimes they would make the covenant, and then one person would do it, and then the other person would make their side, and then they would pass back through. So Abraham goes, how do I know that you're going to keep this promise of this people and nation blessing, who is Jesus? Dig a trench. And if I ever fail to keep my promise, make me like one of these. Now here's where it gets good. Abraham's side of the covenant is, in the next chapter, walk before me and be blameless. It's chapter 17, verse 1. Walk before me, be blameless. So God says, I'm going to make you this promise, people and nation blessing. I'm going to keep my promise. And your side of the covenant, Abraham, I want you to walk before me and be blameless. Okay, so that's the covenant that's going on here. Check out what happens. Verse 12, now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And behold, terror and great darkness fell upon him. God said to Abraham, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, where they will be enslaved and oppressed 400 years. Talking about Egypt. Verse 17, it came about when the sun had set that it was very dark, and behold, there appeared a smoking oven, a flaming torch. Okay, what is this? This is a depiction of God. There appeared a smoking oven and a flaming torch which passed between these pieces. And on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram. God passed through. Who didn't pass through? Abraham. And what? What's going on here? Here's what I think is going on here. And God's side of the covenant. I'm going to make you people and nation blessing. If I don't, make me like one of these. And Abraham, your side of the covenant is to walk before me and be blameless. And I'm going to pass through for you on your side of the covenant. So if I don't keep my promise, make me like one of these. And if you don't walk before me and be blameless, what's he saying? Make me like one of these. Abraham, if you and your people can't be perfect, here's what God is saying in Genesis 15. I ask to die a horrible death, to have my blood spilled. If you can't keep your side of the covenant, I'll die. What? And so in Revelation 19, when Jesus comes back, and it's just like this really boss scene of Jesus coming back. This is what it says. And I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and wages war. His eyes are a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems, and he has a name written on him which no one knows except himself. I always think that is the coolest thing ever. He is clothed with a white robe dipped in blood. What's the blood? It doesn't say for sure, okay? It doesn't say. Some people think it's the blood of his enemies. You know what I think? It's the blood of the covenant. When Jesus, in Genesis 15, passed through the pieces saying, I'm going to keep my promise, and if you don't keep your side of the covenant, make me like one of these. One of the coolest things in the Old Testament, to me, pointing to Jesus in a way that baffles my mind, burns my heart, as I have this better, bigger perspective of a God who's working out this promise of redemption in a way that I could not have fathomed. I don't know if your mind is baffled. Mine was and is. My heart burns when I read that. That highlights God's bigness. Third thing that seeing Jesus in the Old Testament baffles minds, burns hearts, because it elevates dependence over determination. Like when I see Jesus in the Old Testament, I don't just see determination, like Noah, okay? Noah, I don't think it's just about obeying God and being determined through opposition. I think it's about trusting and depending on Jesus as the way of escape from God's wrath. You see that? So I don't want to just read Noah and be determined. I want to read Noah and go, Jesus, I need you. You see that? See the difference? Moses, given the law, it's not just about obeying God and being determined through my weakness. You know, have all these commandments and just do it. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. It's about being pointed to Jesus, who did obey everything perfectly. And looking to him. Independence, not just determination. Here's the point. As I'm going through all this detail, I want to experience now what they experienced in Acts 9 and Luke 24, to see Jesus in the Old Testament, mind baffled, heart burned, and not miss, because I think this is what happens. I think we miss oftentimes the delight of knowing Jesus because all we've done is be determined we're going to obey. I didn't say that. Okay, let me read the way I wrote it. I will miss the delight of knowing Jesus when I open my Bible and see determination without dependence. I miss the delight because I've made it about me and how good I must be instead of about God and how good he is and can be through me. You see that? I'm not trying to diss being determined. I'm just saying, let's look for Jesus and go, Jesus, I don't want to just be determined. I want to depend on you. So, quick question. Have you been giving yourself an opportunity to have your mind baffled and heart burn by coming to know Jesus through his word? Like, have you made room in your life this week to have your mind baffled, heart burn, as you opened and read? Is that part of your life? I'm not trying to sound like super Sunday schoolish, just read your Bible. But there's an opportunity outside of Sunday mornings or podcasts to have mind baffled, heart burned. Really appreciate something that that Terry got this past week from Minnie Murphy. It's an email that she sent Monday or Tuesday, sometime this week, in response to the the Bible Alive Sandhurst U, where we're seeing Jesus in Exodus as we're preparing to teach our kids about it. I love it, okay? This was from Minami to Terry. She said, I learned from Greg on Sunday that every plague corresponded to an Egyptian god. That was new to me, so I decided to look it up and study it a bit. So very exciting and interesting. As I studied, I found Jesus in Exodus in a way I never have before. I'm so excited that I want to share. I can't agree with C.S. Lewis more, that delight is not complete until it's shared. And you are the chosen one today to make my delight complete. So, before Moses even gets to Egypt, after God has revealed himself as the I Am, he's given instructions to talk to Pharaoh about his firstborn son. Israel is named as God's firstborn son, and God is demanding his freedom, like the freedom of Israel. Pharaoh is told that his own firstborn son will die as a result of Pharaoh's hardness of heart and sin. That's all in Exodus 4. So, this is like a first bookend of the one true God contrasting himself with Pharaoh, the god of Egypt. Both have power, both have people they lead, both have firstborn sons who will die, but with contrasting consequences. Now, she types in bold. I found it fascinating that Pharaoh was not only seen as the greatest Egyptian god of all, he was also thought to be Ra, the sun god, manifest in the flesh. Isn't it fascinating that after all the Egyptian gods are defeated in the first 8 plagues, God addresses Pharaoh, Ra himself, in the 9th plague. You know what the 9th plague is? Darkness. And the 9th plague, his light is put out. His identity is stripped. And then in the 10th plague, a number of completion, it is finished. His firstborn son dies, bringing grief and defeat as condemnation for a hardened heart. In contrast, Jesus is the true God manifest in flesh. He is the light that darkness cannot overcome. And even in the darkness of the cross and the grave, his identity is affirmed. He is the firstborn God. He's the firstborn of the true God. And at the point of it is finished, his death brings hope, freedom from oppression of sin, and removes all condemnation forever. Then she talks about Passover. Then she comes back at the end and says, but the most significant to me was the sequence and significance of the 9th and 10th plague, exposing Pharaoh as imposter while introducing Jesus as Redeemer. What? I mean, how cool. She must be a youth leader or something. She is. How cool of someone in our body who just from last week said, I'm going to look for Jesus in the Old Testament because he's there. He's like Waldo. He's there. I'm just going to find him. And I don't know, even if it was like hard to track with everything she was saying, I think the baffled mind, heart burned. Did that come across? I think it did. So really, is there any time in your life right now where you're making room to have your mind baffled, heart burned, knowing Jesus through his word? Let's do it. Seriously, let's do it. Or not. But we'll talk about that later. No way. It is 11:29. Okay. To be honest, I'm not even talking. I haven't talked about the thing I wanted to talk about most. I can't believe it's 11:29. Okay. All right. So we'll do the 60-second version, if possible. Elevates dependence over determination and reintroduces joy in my walk with Jesus. So they're baffled by what he said. They're amazed by who said it. They're amazed because of the transformation. How is he saying this? And I have all sorts of things that I wanted to talk about. How does transformation happen? Romans 12. Transformed by the renewing of my mind. Transformation happens and can happen. I'm so bummed that we're missing this. As I renew my mind with truth. I think, I have a rock over there? I think I left it. Yeah. I'll come get it. I have 2 rocks. What's the difference between these 2 rocks? One's smooth, one's rough, okay? I don't know if you can see. But the students know the answer to this, right? What's the difference between these 2 rocks? Time spent in the water. As we renew our minds with truth, we remember that truth has a capital T. Jesus says about himself, I am the way, I am the truth. And so as we renew our mind with truth, we're not just filling our head with facts, we're pursuing a person, we're pursuing Jesus. He calls himself the living water. And there's a difference between these 2 rocks, and it's pretty simple. Time spent in the water. I wonder if this guy went to a Sunday sermon and heard that, oh man, my life can be transformed as I renew my mind with truth. I wonder if he decided that one day he was going to go spend some time with Jesus, and he goes in the water for a day and then determines it doesn't work. What would you say to that rock? It takes time. Transformation can happen fast. I mean, for Saul, it happens awesomely fast. But what's the difference between these 2 rocks? Time spent in the water. Christians are so lazy. We want to be like this and spend no time in the water, and it makes no sense. Want to be transformed? Renew our minds with truth. And I still can't believe the time went by so fast. Okay, I guess. All right, let's pray. Father, I think it's a good thing that our minds would be baffled and our hearts would burn as we see you, but far greater, really far greater, is that we would run to you and cling to you, spend time with you, and in that to be transformed by you, that truth would have its way. I don't want, and I don't think this church wants to be a group of people who stays the same. I want to be transformed. And I think you've instructed us how, Father. I pray, Lord, that by your grace and power, we would give ourselves to spending time with you, to chasing you, to pursuing you, and that you, by your grace and power, would change us by the renewing of our mind. Amen. Before you leave, I had one challenge that I wanted to give, and this might be a cool life group thing. I have a long sheet of truths that I need. Like, I need these things. It's a page and a half. We made it for our students about 4 years ago, and this stays in the front of my Bible. I need this. Maybe a cool challenge for you by yourself or with your life group to say, hey, we're going to make our own set of transformational truths. Like a one sheet of paper, these are the things that I need to hear. Things like I believe that Satan, gosh, there's so many of these. I believe that Satan is a damned, murderous liar who hates me. I believe that I'm one with Christ and I have infinite strength to act on behalf of my impossible weakness when I depend on him. I believe that Jesus is my high priest and advocate who sympathizes with my weakness, and I can approach God in confidence and find mercy and grace because of Jesus. Like all these sorts of statements, this is what I need. It would be a cool thing, a good thing for you if you made your own and maybe did it with a life group. All right, love you guys. See you later.